Hey folks, this is the OnePlus 5, and this is my review of the OnePlus 5. And yes, it does look the same pretty much from the front as the previous OnePlus, the OnePlus 3T, or the OnePlus 3, which are, pretty much identical. And in terms of industrial design, you still have that slightly rounded top, rounded bottom, and the fingerprint sensor, and as such, this is unmistakably a OnePlus device. And the reason I'm saying this is that if you flip it over, it looks kind of like an iPhone 7 Plus. And look, the comparison is inevitable, and I wanted to get this elephant out of the room because, yes, this is a phone with a dual camera. Yes, the pod is placed in the exact same location and looks very similar, despite with a lot of dust, by the way, which I'm going to wipe out. But it looks very similar to what we've seen on the iPhone 7 Plus. But that being said, it is very different insofar that there's an edge here that's rounded, an edge here that's rounded, no big roundness here, which means that this feels very different in hand than an iPhone 7 Plus. In fact, it's smaller, it's narrower. So, look, you can compare this all you want. I don't think it feels and looks like an iPhone 7 Plus that much once you have it in hand and you start using it. But yes, in photos at first glance, the comparison is inevitable. Now, the other thing I wanted to bring up is that this is very much an aluminum design with built-in antenna bands, and I think that's another thing that could compound this kind of design similarities to the iPhone. You can see the antenna bands down here embedded. Yes, there is a bit of that as well, but look, again, to me, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like an iPhone. And even though it does kind of look like one. So now that that's out of the way, let's really talk about what this phone brings to the table. This is the Midnight Black. This is the high-end model. 8 gigabytes of RAM. I'm going to repeat that in case you missed it. 8 gigabytes of RAM. Yes, some of my older laptops have less RAM than this. And, of course, Snapdragon 835. It has 128 gigabytes of built-in storage, this particular model. And then there's a 6 gigabyte version with 64 gigs of storage. So that's pretty impressive specs. Does that make a difference though, 8 gigs of RAM? Let's talk about that in a minute. First, let me walk you through this phone's design. Starting with the front, we have the same fingerprint readers last year on the bottom here. And capacitive buttons, I don't know if you can see them. They kind of light up very faintly when I press. There's a back button here and a menu button, recent app button here. Of course, you can configure those to be the other way if you're a heathen and you don't want to adhere to standards, Android standards that is. In front here is a 16 megapixel f/2 camera with 1 micron pixels. This is the same camera that was in the OnePlus 3T last year. You got a notification LED in there somewhere. You've got the earpiece, some sensors. Basically what you expect from a modern smartphone. This is a 16:9 display, no stretched wide, ultra wide display here, 5.5 inches. AMOLED, this is the exact same display as the OnePlus 3T and OnePlus 3. This is a 1080p display, that's what I mean. It is a 1080p display. So be aware that you're not getting 2K. That's to be expected. Somewhere to meet the price point, which we'll talk about in a minute, you do need to get slightly lower specs. But frankly, in everyday use, this doesn't matter. As we all know, the Galaxy S8 is configured by default to run a 1080p, even though it does have a 2K display, and nobody notices, nobody cares. I really don't think it matters. In the back, you have this beautiful Midnight Black here, in this case, aluminum unibody machined finish, anodized, beautiful. The other color is slate gray. It's a kind of a gunmetal gray. You can kind of hardly tell the difference unless you see the phone side by side. And here are those two cameras and that LED flash and I think a microphone back here. This is an interesting setup. It's very similar to what we've seen on the iPhone in the sense that there is a main camera and a telephoto camera. And I believe this is the main, this is the telephoto. But let me read out the specs. 16 megapixel main camera, f over 1.7, so a 0.3 f-stop improvement over last year. It's no OIS, so that's a huge disappointment to me, and I'll get to that when we talk about the photos. And then we have the small pixels. They're 1.12 micron. This is a Sony IMX 398. And next to it is a Sony IMX 350. Now this is a telelens. It's but naturally like optically zoomed in lens basically. 20 megapixels, f over 2.6, not the fastest lens. 1 micron pixels, just like the front camera, 1 microns. No OIS. So that's what OnePlus is bringing to the table, and they feel that this should provide them with one of the best smartphone cameras on the market today. And I'll tell you my verdict in a bit, but I'm disappointed of the lack of OIS, and you'll see that it matters. That being said, this is definitely a better camera than last year's OnePlus 3T. And honestly, that camera wasn't bad. So we're talking about a phone that is competitive, but I don't think it's quite up there with the best imaging devices today. Beautiful embossed OnePlus logo. You saw the antenna bands earlier. The NFC, by the way, is located right around the camera pod right here. It's a little rim of plastic. I'm not sure you can see it. Dual LED flash right here. Now let's talk about the top and bottom and what we get to find. There's really nothing at the top. You saw my unboxing video. By the way, if you haven't seen my unboxing video, go see it. It just got published at the same time as this. This here on the right hand side is the power lock key with the SIM tray. This is a dual SIM phone, but it does not have micro SD expansion. So it's a dual SIM, nano SIM behind there. Power lock key. At the bottom, you have a headphone jack, and this is what shows you how thin this phone is. It's a 7.25 millimeter design. It's about a millimeter thinner than last year's phone, and it feels that way, and you can see it from the size of the headphone jack. USB Type-C, USB 3.0 with dash charging, which is OnePlus's proprietary charging technology. And then you have a mono speaker here. That sounds okay, but it's not awesome. And then, of course, on the right-hand side, sorry, the left-hand side, because I talked about the right already, you have OnePlus's proprietary yet awesome notification slider. So basically right now it's on silent, and you can bump it down to do not disturb or to ring. So ring, do not disturb, and silent. Silent is the way I like it. And that's really cool. That's been on all the OnePluses since the OnePlus 2. And then you get the volume rocker. And that's basically it. Look at this display though. Superb viewing angles. This thanks to AMOLED. Great colors. Superb contrast. By the way, I'm recording this video with the U11 from HTC. So I normally do live videos, and I decided, I don't want to have to edit this video, so I'm just going to do one take using the OnePlus, using the U11 from HTC to film the OnePlus 5, because, it's under embargo, so I can't publish these live. So there you go, beautiful colors, great display. What's inside? I said it briefly earlier. Snapdragon 835, that means gigabit LTE, Bluetooth 5.0. What else do we get out of this? As I said, a shit ton of RAM. And there's the camera, which I will talk about in a minute. We get lots of storage. It's UFS 2.1, which is a pretty fast way to access flash storage. In fact, the OnePlus 3T had UFS, so this is not completely new. There's probably a primary mic down here. Yes, there is. I didn't mention that, of course. As far as I know, there's only two mics, the one in the back and the one in the bottom. No four mics here like the U11 or anything like that. And so It's light. It's pretty light. It's 153 grams, I think. That's pretty light. It definitely feels lighter than a Pixel or U11 in hand. Feels amazingly comfortable in hand. Display is great. So look, I have no complaints. This is an awesome phone. This is a flagship device. Let me navigate quickly through and open some apps so you can kind of see. Let's see, what can I open? Flipboard is a good one. Let's go back and open the web browser, wherever it is. And there's some XDA forums action, whatever the last thing I had. Messaging app, I have really not used this for phone calls or messages very much. Play Store, so we can see what's going on. Let's see what else. The dialer. I'll open the camera again. What else can I open here? Let's open Play Music, and yeah, I don't know. That's about it. Maybe the gallery, the file manager. You know, a few things. Twitter, Facebook. This should give you a pretty good idea how fast this phone feels. So now that I've got all these apps in the background, taking up some RAM, you can see this is smooth as silk. You'd expect this. This is a Snapdragon 835 powering this machine. So really smooth. It doesn't feel quite as quick to me as the U11 did, which is the kind of the champion that I have so far in terms of performance for Snapdragon 835. It does feel a little faster than the Galaxy S8, but the Galaxy S8, you know, seems to be a little on the slow side for an 835. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still faster than an 821. Oh, maybe not as quite as fast as the Pixel, but the Galaxy has some issues as it seems to be getting older in the sense of used more. It slows down a little, and but it's nothing. You know, it's nothing spectacular. This I haven't had long enough to really be able to tell. So. But so far, it's pretty fast, although not quite as fast as U11, faster than the Galaxy S8, but the Galaxy S8 is up there, you know, in terms of speed already. It's pretty fast because Snapdragon 835. So, battery-wise, there's a 3,300 milliamp hour battery that's baked in here. It's not removable, obviously. This is not a water-resistant phone, not officially. There's no IP rating, although OnePlus says that, you know, it will survive without any issues being in the rain for a little bit, or, you know, the basic kind of things you'd expect a phone to be used, environment you'd be used in. So, you know, it's not something I would submerge, but on the other hand, if you happen to get it a slightly moist, it's not going to be too angry. But no official water resistant or water proofing. It's a bit of a dust magnet, as you can see. I'm gathering dust just making this video here. So yeah, so that's the phone in a nutshell. I haven't really had a chance to play with it enough to really give you a feel on battery life. To me, it feels the champion right now is Galaxy S8, and I think part of the speed issues we're seeing in the Galaxy S8 is optimizations for battery life. It kind of maybe slows down a little bit on purpose to keep the battery going, and it does a very good job. The battery life in the S8 is pretty phenomenal, especially the S8 Plus. This seems to be a little less in performance and battery life. I'm like, yeah, than the U11. The U11's battery life is not as good as the S8. I'd say it's about on par with the Pixel, but this seems to be a bit lesser so far. Like I'm reaching it's lasting the whole day without any issues, but I'm feeling like it would be a stretch to do 2 days on this phone. So perhaps this battery 3300 is a little bit of a compromise to get that 7.25 millimeter thickness. Again, this phone does everything good, everything well. I mean, I love it. I think it's great. But I want to talk about the thing that you know you were expecting. Now that we're 15 minutes into this video, let's talk about the camera. Because look, the display is fine even though it's 1080p. The processor is awesome, lots of RAM, lots of storage. You know, there's a few niggles in terms of lack of SD, which I think is still a very important thing to have, but they don't seem to want. It does have an NFC, so you can do Android Pay, all that good stuff. Battery life, as I mentioned, still up in the air, but okay. So really it's about the camera, right? It's about this dual camera system. And the lack of OIS is a very, very vexing thing. Now, by the way, I just, as an aside, want to mention, you can, because of OnePlus, set up the... go in the setting here and set this up to have the buttons be software buttons instead. And there you go. So that's actually my preferred way of doing it. So I'll change it now so that you know that it's a thing. So there you go. I prefer that because I'm used to Nexus and Pixel. But that's always been there. There's a bunch of new features. This is Oxygen OS. This is running Android 7.1, I believe. Let's double check that. It is 7.1.1, which is a good thing. Although O is about to come out. So yeah. Sorry, I got interrupted by a phone call. Of course, it wasn't anything important. So as I was saying, this is Android 7.1.1, and yeah, I mean, it's great. It's just obviously not Android O, which is not going to be out for a little while. So hopefully the updates will come a little faster this time around at OnePlus. We hope. So let's talk about the camera, because the camera, dual camera with no OIS, that immediately brings up some red flags for me as a camera phone enthusiast and long-time photographer using camera phones. I'm a little judgmental when it comes to camera performance. So what's my takeaway? First of all, in a nutshell, this camera is really good. It's definitely better than the OnePlus 3 and 3T last year. It is not as good as the Pixel, Galaxy S8, or U11. Now the U11 is really amazing. The Pixel is still really amazing. And the Galaxy S8, I think, holds its own. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. They all take photos a little differently, but they all really rock the world. This is a little lower than that. It's maybe around the same performance as the G6. But I think the G6 is still better in low light. So this is the issue. Low light performance on this phone is not, in my opinion, good enough. And let me show you that. So let's not start the camera because that's not really where it's at. But let's actually start the image viewer. There you go, the gallery. So let's talk about, first of all, let's start at the very beginning of these photos I took. So this is a photo that is in portrait mode of a performance that I took, that I went to. And you can see the performer here on stage. And it looks pretty freaking great. As you can see, everything is looking good. But this is using the f/1.7 camera. Now, here's the same shot using the zoom lens, f/1.6. And again, things really look good. One of the things I had noticed is there's slight differences in the color quality. This was a little bit brighter and maybe a little yellower or bluer, I guess. Then this was a little warmer and a little less exposure. But they look, I mean, I don't know if my U11 is going to be able to focus, but these photos look phenomenal. Let me actually zoom in so you can see what I'm talking about. There you go. Juba, my friend here, looks really fantastic. So this is a good thing. And then here's another photo from the same performance with really accurate color. This is again with a zoom lens. So, I threw the OnePlus 5T into the fire, basically, by doing low light first. Here's a great example of a 1x shot. So this is not with the zoom lens. And you can see low light, very, very good, right? But not, you'll see in a second, it's not perfect. And I don't mean perfect because really, no phone is perfect. But compared to the state of the art, it's a little lacking. So here's another shot from that performance. This is with the zoom lens, and as you can see, there was motion here. The person wasn't still, so this is pretty impressive. It will do really well in most cases. Here's another one, again with the zoom lens. So I think this is pretty good. Now here's a photo. I want to zoom into the background. You can see how grainy things are. If you look really carefully, in the background and everywhere, it's just a sea of noise. And this is where low light kind of falls apart on this phone, in my opinion. I hope you can see this. I mean, it is pretty grainy. And, honestly, it's like one of those things where I tried the portrait mode and it didn't work because there's too little light. So it won't do portrait mode when there's too little light. But more importantly, this is a level of light that the Pixel, the Galaxy S8, and the you know, the U11 would have totally nailed. So here's another shot taken indoors, not low light. You can see from the background back here, there is a window with natural light coming in. But nonetheless, with the regular lens, we're not getting huge amounts of detail in this shot. And lots of motion blur. And it's a fire, by the way, in case you haven't noticed. And so this shot was a little disappointing to me. I was expecting this to shine. I mean, there's enough ambient light in this shot. Here's another photo showing the field of view of the single, let me do it this way, this is the 1x lens, and here is the zoom lens. Same perspective. And then here's another shot with the zoom lens in good light. Look at the amount of detail here in the bird's feathers. I mean, this is really impressive. But again, lots of light here. So let's continue. There's a beautiful picture taken with the normal lens, not the zoom, in San Francisco. I cropped it a little bit, but you know, color rendition, again, good in daylight. Here's a zoom photo taken in the Castro during this Pride Festival that's happening right now in San Francisco. And look at all these beautiful details. I mean, it's really good in good light. This is the zoom camera. And then here's a no light shot with the main camera. And you can see, pretty impressive, right? Neon is a pretty hard thing to get. You can see there's enough detail. All that dirt in the ceiling is actually correct. It's there in real life. And you can see the dirt in the neon sign as well. The sign's been in the rain for a few decades. And then here's a close-up taken with the zoom lens. And as you can see, good depth of field, like shallow. So it's focusing on the IE, rock, C. You see what I did there? But the I and E are focused, ROX are a little defocused. So that did a very good job. That's not portrait mode, that's just the zoom camera. And then here's a daylight shot with a zoom camera. Again, very good. Now, this next shot is going to show you portrait mode. I really haven't had enough of time right now to use this phone to take pictures of real people. But mostly, I wanted to compare in kind of like a controlled environment how the portrait mode works. So it only works in good daylight. And then, so here's a portrait shot. And next to it, here is the same shot with the main camera as a macro shot. So this is my yerba mate from lunch today. And I want to show you how there's a bit of loss of detail here in the writing. And yes, you do see that the background is slightly more defocused versus this shot, right? But here, like, this is the natural shallow depth of field of the non-zoom lens versus a little bit more, and of course the geometry, the perspective is a little more realistic because this is a close-up shot versus this being a combined software-made shot of the two cameras using the portrait mode. But the amount of detail on the macro shot here is staggeringly better. You can see, actually read the text. There's so much more information on this photo and on the can than there is on this photo on the can. So I'm not sure if I had to focus on it. I thought it would resolve all this by itself, and then color rendition is a little off. You see it's a little warmer here. And that's another thing I noticed is an inconsistency in color quality between the 1x lens and the 2x, the zoom lens, the telephoto. So that's my takeaway so far of using this phone for imaging. And look, it's really good. I'm really happy with it, but it's not quite good enough to say it can play in the same league as even an LG G6, in my opinion. I think it's good, but it's not, it's far better than last year's OnePlus 3T, but it's still not quite as good enough to really play in the leagues of the Pixel Galaxy S8 and even the U11, which is filming this right now. So the lack of OIS is, I think, what's hurting it in low light. In some circumstance, like that portrait where I zoomed in the background and showed you the noise, you know, and the size of the pixels, 1.12 for the main camera, even though it has an f/1.7 lens, and 1 micron for the 20 megapixel. And that's, I think, the problem here is the G6 is the only phone with small pixels that has the proper algorithms to do proper noise reduction to really deal with it properly. Whereas this phone is not quite there yet. And the other phones, the Pixel, the U11, the Galaxy S8, all have 1.4, 1.55 micron large pixels, in addition to having really low f-stops of 1.7 and 1.8. So that's my verdict. That's the takeaway for me for this phone. I love it. It's great. You should get it, but know what you're getting yourself into. They had to keep the display at 1080p for price. They'll remove the OIS for price. By the way, I do want to mention that the camera components, the hardware, and a lot of this industrial design is very similar to the Oppo R11. And I believe that's just for economies of scale. But of course, the Oppo 11 doesn't have a Snapdragon 835 and the great ISP that comes with it and the great Qualcomm imaging optimizations that come with that. And it's, of course, the software for the imaging is pretty much unique to the OnePlus. So they've assured me that even though the phones are similar looking, the software is very, very unique to each phone. I think it's a great phone for the money. And, yes, you did have to remove OIS for the cost, perhaps, and you had to remove... they couldn't go up to 2K yet this year. Still no micro SD, which I think is a bummer, but at least there's a headphone jack, right? I'm talking at you, U11. But anyway, that's it. That's the OnePlus 5 in a nutshell. And so let's talk about the final thing. The thing that I kind of screwed up in my review, in my unboxing video. Well, I didn't screw it up, but I didn't look it up enough. Is the price. So this is the 8GB, 128GB model in midnight black, and that one costs $539 US. Of course, it's an unlocked phone. It will work on any of the GSM US networks. That's AT&T and T-Mobile. This is not compatible with CDMA legacy networks, and I'm not sure it'll work on Verizon LTE only like the U11 does. So be aware of that. You can get the 6GB 64 gigs of storage slate gray version for, are you ready? $479 US. So it's a bit more expensive than OnePlus 3 and OnePlus 3T last year, but not that much. If you consider how much of an improvement this phone is, processor, slimness, dual camera, and a bunch of other things over the OnePlus 3T last year, I think that it's worth the extra little bit of money to go to $539 and buy this absolutely gorgeous midnight black. So, I'm happy with this phone. I'm going to continue using it. I expect me to post some photos as soon as the embargo lifts, photos that I've taken with this phone. And, stay tuned to my Twitter, to my Facebook, to my G+, for more content. I will be discussing this extensively on my podcast. With no other than Andrew Mertonic of Android Central, who's also reviewing this phone. So we'll have lots of great insight on this phone and the podcast this week. Go to mobiletechpodcast.com to subscribe to my podcast. Go to my Twitter, TNKGRL, at TNKGRL, like Tank Girl without the vowels. Go to my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Miriam Joire, MYRIAMJOIRE. If you're already here right now watching this video, just click on the YouTube link and subscribe. Please subscribe. Please thumbs up if you like. Thumbs down if you don't. I hope you don't. But hey, I'm not here to please everyone. So, subscribe, like, listen to the podcast. Follow me on Twitter. Those are the main things you need to do to keep in touch with what I'm doing, with the work I'm doing. And I hope you enjoyed this video, despite its brief interruption with that phone call earlier. And again, it's not live, but I might as well have it on it live. So U11, thank you for being a great video camera. OnePlus 5, folks. We have a winner here for the price, absolutely. Even not for the price. I think this is a worthy flagship for 2017. But, the camera still has some issues. It's still not quite up there yet. Everything else, though, kudos. Top notch. All right, guys. Cheers. Take care, everyone. Bye.